If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already in Rome, or at least on your way there. Perhaps you've been preparing this trip for months. You've read the guides, the blogs, you've followed the travel influencers. You've watched the documentaries and the movies about the city. So let's say you know exactly what you're going to do. The churches and the museums you're going to visit. The monuments where you're going to take your selfies. That's why we're going to try something a little different here. In just a few minutes, we'll lay down everything to do in all the neighborhoods to visit if you really want to feel like a local, and if you want to experience the Italian lifestyle, or even better, the Roman lifestyle. Let's start with something you've probably seen in the movies and may not make a lot of sense to you. Morning coffee at the bar. Here's how it works in Rome. You get in line at the cash register, and then you push through to the bar for the first coffee of the day. I can't stress this enough. Espresso coffee. And you'll have to drink it standing up, brushing elbows with your neighbor, who will definitely drop a few crumbs of their cornetto onto your jacket. Now that's right, cornetto, not brioche. In the rest of the world, they call it brioche. But in Rome, it's a cornetto. If the idea of taking breakfast standing up and surrounded by the crowd makes you feel uneasy, trust me, it doesn't have to be. These 5 minutes of queuing and shoving will teach you everything you need to know about the Roman spirit and their customs. Right away, you'll become friends with the barman, and you'll be deep in conversation, bouncing around from the latest news to shopping lists and personal affairs. Don't worry if you don't speak the language. I'm sure you'll get by anyway. And you'll soon find that every Roman's favorite topic is the city of Rome itself. This is an important secret that you'll have to get used to as soon as possible. Rome doesn't just come to life in its beautiful art, but especially in the loving words of its people. Just like the Italian mothers and their children. Affection, then dismay, then complaints, then worry, and finally, hidden admiration. Okay, I'm rambling now. Where were we? Right. So we're still at the airport. You're about to pick up your luggage, or you're ready to take a train or a cab to the Eternal City. This nickname comes from the Roman poet Tibullus, who first called Rome the Urbs Aeterna, the immortal city, immune to the passing of time. Rome, to this day, attracts thousands of people from around the world, tourists and travelers who, just like you, dive into the city's depths. So let's dive in ourselves, let's broaden our horizons and forget about selfies in front of the Colosseum or tourist brand carbonara. You're in Rome. Let's do like the Romans. It's morning. We've already mentioned coffee, so now let's get right to the next point. Before reaching the Colosseum, St. Peter's Square or Piazza Venezia, the first thing you'll bump into, no matter where you are, is one of the greatest artistic creations of this city. Its mobility. You should know that Rome is crossed by two great rivers. The first is the Tiber. The other is the traffic. If you're used to efficient cities or wide open roads, forget about them here. The streets of Rome are 2,000 years old, and when they were created originally, their requirements were quite different than today's. That's why moving around always requires a bit of patience. If you can, don't be afraid to go on foot. The historical center is perfect for walking. And remember, in Rome, the shortest path between 2 points is never a straight line. Instead, it's a tangled maze of streets that you can follow only if you aren't afraid of getting lost. Perhaps you've decided to spend the morning in the center, between Piazza Navona and the Pantheon, and you visited everything the guide told you. Now is the time to let yourselves go. Start walking towards Campo de' Fiori. Lose yourselves in the alleyways surrounding the square. Here, you'll find lots of tourist bars and restaurants. But you'll also find boutiques, bookstores, and food shops where the Romans like to stock up. Then stop for a moment and take in the light. Watch the dazzling reflection on the ochras and the reds of the houses and on the marble of the buildings. Look at the deep blue of the sky framed by the rooftops. You'll think that Rome is just an excuse to give a shape to this perfect light that'll follow you for your entire trip. For an unconventional experience, follow this tip. Grab a takeaway coffee in the whereabouts of Campo de' Fiori and walk to the temple ruins of Torre Argentina. It's more than just an archaeological site. It's a sort of open-air cat cafe, the most ancient and bizarre cat sanctuary in the world. If you happen to be a cat person, you'll fall right in love with the hundreds of felines that live here amongst the columns and the rubble. Some of them may even come up to you for a picture or a purr. Others will watch warily from afar, as if direct descendants of the ancient Roman cats that witnessed the murder of Julius Caesar himself, who was assassinated right here on the Ides of March in 44 BCE. So let's leave these ancient buildings behind and move on to the Rione, which means the neighborhood, of Testaccio. Here, you'll find a little city inside the city. Testaccio is where the workers of the slaughterhouse used to live. Up until 1975, it was the main meatpacking district of the city. But in later years, it was transformed into exhibition spaces. And it's a marvelous example of well-preserved industrial archaeology. Right next to the converted slaughterhouse, you'll find the local Testaccio market. Here, the Romans come to buy fruits and vegetables, homemade pasta, local cheeses and cuts, and all sorts of meats, or even just to grab a quick bite to eat. There isn't really room to sit down on your own, but it's fine to just share lunch on a bench with a stranger and have a little chat. On the other hand, if you want to take your time, you should seek out an original osteria, which is how the Romans called their little eateries. But don't expect red and white checkered tablecloths or a flask of wine with a candle in it. This isn't the 50s, and it isn't a Hollywood movie. Choose your restaurant on the base of the menu. The shorter, the better. Look at the prices and use your gut. Sit yourselves down and take your time. Enjoy the ambiance and study the first courses carefully. You'll find that there's a sort of musical logic to them, as if one note follows the other. Cacio e pepe, for example. It's simply pasta with pecorino cheese and some pepper. Add in some jowl bacon, and you get gricia. Add a little tomato sauce to that, and hey presto, it's a matriciana. If instead of tomato you add creamy egg, though, finally, you'll get the original carbonara. And don't worry if these dishes seem simple. The recipes were originally peasant dishes, back when people had to make tasty food with only a handful of ingredients. Even the meat dishes were based on whatever was left over from the butchers. And today, those simple delicacies are renowned the world over. In any case, let the oste, the owner, guide your choice. Savor every bite, ask for a coffee, the bill, and then take your time before setting off again. Forget about rushing from one tourist attraction to another. Why not take in the nature of Rome's parks instead? After all, you shouldn't even attempt to see every single thing Rome has to offer. Even the Romans themselves haven't seen it all. So just relax in the most famous park of the center, the Villa Borghese Gardens, or perhaps in the majestic green of the Villa Doria Pamphili. Lay a blanket on the grass and lie under a pine tree. Take in a bit of peace and quiet before leaping back into the bustling city. You'll soon notice that there's always movement in the streets. Traffic and car horns, music, and all the languages of the world. The Romans themselves, however, even those that speak English, when talking with you, will still prefer to use Italian. Or even better, the local Roman dialect. You'll often hear a few expressions over and over. So here they are for your convenience. Let's start with the most common ones. The first that comes to my mind is dai. Literally, come on. It can be a suggestion or even a strong way of saying yes. For example, want to come to the stadium tomorrow? Dai, yes, let's. Another is andiamo, which means let's go. and can mean so many things according to the tone. It could be, let's go somewhere, or it might even be a strong and rude suggestion to get moving. So let's get back to our afternoon stroll. Dai, andiamo. If at this point of the trip you're feeling a bit out of it, and the city is making you dizzy, perhaps it's time to see it from a vantage point, way up high. If you remember your history, Rome was built on 7 hills. To this day, we can walk the roads of the ancient Romans all the way up to, for example, the Aventine Hill and the Orange Garden, with its spectacular view of the city. And while you're up there, don't miss out on this unforgettable experience. On the giant green door of the Priory of the Knights of Malta, you'll find a large keyhole. Look through it, and you'll see the postcard pretty image of St. Peter's Basilica, nestled at the center of hedges. Here comes the night. The streets are full. Men and women leaving work, tourists and students. Sunset bathes the city in deep reds. Why would you want to go home on a night like this? If you're looking to try the Italian traditional aperitivo, you can do so in the Monti neighborhood, not far from Piazza Venezia. In the Middle Ages, and even before, it was considered a dangerous place, best avoided. But today, it's full of bars, pubs, and fashionable wine-tasting joints. Or you could go to Piazza Vittorio Emanuele II, which the Romans simply call Piazza Vittorio, in the heart of the Esquiline Rione. Sit down for a drink around the recently restructured square, and then explore this multi-ethnic neighborhood with its stores and restaurants from all over the world. Romans usually eat dinner around 9, and it's not easy to find a seat in the most popular restaurants or osterie. So here's a tip: book early. Otherwise, you could always go for a pizza, such as the pizza al taglio, or pizza by the cut, which you can either enjoy while walking or sitting down. Unlike Neapolitan pizza, the Roman variety is thin and crunchy. But first, try some supplì, fiori di zucca, and filetti di baccalà. I won't even tell you what these are. Just trust me and find out on your own. I'll just say that they're typical Roman street foods, fried and delicious. The night is still young, so after eating, it's time for some fun. Rome is a large city, and you can find all sorts of clubs, discos, bars, and cinemas. But if you want to stay away from the tourist traps, best to leave the center and to pass the evening at the Pineto. Up until the 19th century, this area was covered in fields and pastures. Today, it's been gentrified, and it's home to the hipsters and artists from all over the world. In the midst of its Art Nouveau architecture and its street art, you can sip on organic wines and craft beers, indie music and DJ sets. You can visit bookshops, art house cinemas, and record stores. But if you want something more in line with Fellini's Dolce Vita and the Roman holidays of the 60s, try taking a walk through the center in the early hours of the morning, when everyone else is asleep. When Rome finally goes quiet, you can almost hear the echo of your own steps. Just an old man walking their dog and you. They greet you with a buongiorno. This is the only time in which you can enjoy the beauty of the town on your own. Stop in front of the Trevi Fountain. Listen to the melody of the water. And let yourselves be carried away by its spell. Admire the Temple of Hadrian and the Piazza di Pietra. And don't fear being whisked away by this dream forever. Soon, it will be daytime. The bars will be pulling up their shutters and dragging out their tables and chairs. Another shot of espresso, another day in the Eternal City is about to begin.